Here we go.
Here we are.
We are back. Hello, Zach. Already, you're here. So glad you're here. I'm
Hello.
here with I'm here with Script Doctor. We were just chatting. We're so excited to talk about Out of the Past. For me, it has a very special place. We both have seen it when we were fairly young. You saw it where? Where did you see it at first?
So while I was growing up, we had in Ontario we had this station called TVO, so Television Ontario, and every Saturday night they'd have a program called Saturday Night at the Movies, and they would play pretty much anything between like the dawn of cinema to maybe the mid to late 80s.
Yeah.
At least at that time, but mostly it was like classics and things you didn't know, and they would have intermissions in the movie where the host of the show would be interviewing the cast and getting small background details and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
I saw that was my introduction to tons of classic films, and I'd watch that more often than I'd see any of the current day stuff at that time because most of the great movies were not really age appropriate for a toddler,
Right.
and this was accessible at home. So that's kind of like what started my love for films, and one of the ones that I absolutely enjoyed watching was Out of the Past, and I see it
Yeah.
occasionally, like once a month or so, or at least it felt like that way for me as a kid, um,
Yeah.
growing up. And yeah, it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it is. For me, it was formative. Zach, have you seen it? If you're here in the room, have you seen Out of the Past? Leave a comment in the chat there. I came by it. I was in college, and we had a really nice screening room, like a nice theater, and we were doing genre films, and we were looking at different ones that, again, I think the great thing about having a television channel like you had, or what I used to have growing up, is it wasn't something that you were already looking for. Like, you just went to the channel and you were presented with things that were outside your comfort zone, or they were things that you hadn't heard from, or there wasn't this recommend engine going, hey, you watch Transformers, maybe you should watch Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Something I really liked. Hi, Troy. Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. We're just deep diving into Out of the Past now, and really looking at something that frankly is, I think, one of the best film noirs, but it's just this atmospheric, humorous, just elevated movie that's a little gem. So many people haven't seen it that we really want them to look at it. For me, I saw it in a movie theater and film school when I was in college, and it blew me away because not only did it feel contemporary, but I was seeing, Robert Mitchum at the beginning of his career just throwing down and being awesome. He takes a lot of criticism of like, he's not doing anything. It's just for being Robert Mitchum. It's like, no, this guy had a persona from the beginning. He made it look effortless. With his acting, there wasn't a kind of overthinking to it or anything. It was a very intuitive acting, versus somebody like Kirk Douglas, who was very much about a technical actor, a very good actor that way. And these two men were just starting their career, and they started even competing with each other on the set, and that helped the two characters that they played. And I watched that film and I thought to myself, I want to make a movie like that sometime. And yes, that is hello. Netters, hello. And for me, it really formed what eventually became Trouble Is My Business. And what I mean by that is it's sort of a kindred spirit to it, in that the narrative was a combination of like flashback storytelling and linear storytelling at the same time. I love the idea of telling a story that was inevitable in flashbacks, but with a real world kind of reason for the flashback, and the inevitability of like the intersecting lines of everything that's going to happen. It ends up kind of having a sad but necessary resolution. So it really was it was like a masterclass in what made film noir good. And I just want to dig into it with you. Do you want to? We'll take a crack at. Let's take a crack at like explaining the basic storyline.
Well, yeah, but before I want to do that, I want to pick up on a very important word that you laid out, which is actually like the definition of story and plot, which is inevitability.
Yes.
And some people like to, well, not so much like to, but some people accidentally conflate that with predictability, and they're not the same thing. Inevitability is something where you manage to take the audience with you, and they don't really know what's going to happen next. But by the time they hit the end of that story, they realize like that's the way it has to be. Whereas predictability, you are ahead of the characters in what you're watching. And that's something that's really important. And I think that's what highlights classic film, like outside of any genre. It's just the fact that you realize, oh, it's a series of inevitable events, and they're driven by each
Right.
character's motivation to achieve their own personal goal. Like, and then that gets us right into the plot of this one, where
Yeah.
I'll start a little bit at we're in this kind of like,
Yeah, where's our entry point here? I guess we talk about Jeff, right? Jeff Bailey
we
as
got
played by Robert Mitchum.
Robert Mitchum. He has he's the new man in town, runs the local gas station, employs a deaf boy, and
Yeah.
the town doesn't really not a whole lot of the town really likes him, but there's this one sweet girl named Anne who is just madly in love with him, and he with her, and
Yeah.
he's trying to forge a new life here until someone from his past recognizes him.
That's right. And there's some beautiful, every line has like these double meanings, like Bailey's gas thing. It's like, oh, how'd you go by that? And he's like, well, unless it's a big sign, you know, and he sees the name up there. And
Yeah.
every line has like this beautiful cleverness. And Jeff Bailey was a former private investigator. And in the movie, he fled from New York, and he had fallen in love with this woman named Kathy. And Kathy was a girl he was hired to track down by this what would you say, influential, corrupt businessman named Wit, which is a great name,
Yeah.
Wit. And that's played by Kirk Douglas. And Kathy is played by the amazing Jane Greer. And the businessman sort of claimed that this woman, Kathy, shot him and stole his money. But Jeff Bailey just stopped caring about her obvious guilt and completely was bedazzled by her charm. So they run away together, but then they get separated. And so Jeff, as you said, lives in this small town. He's managing a gas pump, trying to start over with this girl, Anne, who's just this decent, innocent girl who knows nothing about his dark past, you know, and just cares about him. And it just breaks your heart because she's going to find out who he really is. He's going to break her heart, and it's inevitable. And I love at the very end of the film how they resolve that. You have to see the film to see how it is, but it is, and it's sad but necessary. And as you say, good storytelling is unexpected but inevitable. So when you're watching a great movie, you're like not entirely sure where it's going. You might know where it's going, but then when you see it, it's like, oh, of course, that was inevitable, and it just lands on you. And the storytellers earned it. You know, you can't just do the what the twist, and you have no grounding to earning it. Or anything, you know, that's lazy storytelling. And the kind of storytelling that we love and that we're trying to do is you find out ways of being clever, but it needs to make sense. It needs to have a progression that even if unexpected seems inevitable at the end. And something that's really nice about Out of the Past is in this case, the past, as it always does in film noir, it comes back to haunt him. Because this henchman arrives in town and insists that Jeff go see his employer, who is Wit. He's the man he betrayed. He double-crossed him. And then on the way to Wit, Jeff is in a car telling Anne his complete story. And the film ends back there in the present, which is a beautiful loop. And that actually was the beginning of the idea I had for Trouble Is My Business, when he gets in the car at the very beginning and says, take me to the cemetery, she's still alive. He's telling the past of the story, and the movie ends with arriving at the cemetery for the inevitable confrontation in the cemetery. And that really was influenced by Out of the Past, because I love the simple, elegant way that they flashed back, told the story, and used the kind of playing with time, so that you felt that you were just one step ahead of the character, but you were like, no, don't do that. You know what's going to happen. And I love that, because for me, that's the ticking clock. I mean, I love that device. Don't you love that?
I do love that device. I also love the fact that it only works when the main character is an honest man, because that's kind of like one of the most important aspects with regards to like your traditional type of film noir, where it involves the PI, it involves the seeking of truth. It's It's basically he's an honest man who can see a con ahead of him and knows how to play with that to come out as a victor without compromising his own values or rules. But what ends up happening is that the femme fatale comes in there and compromises him to a point where he challenges that honest behavior that he's had. And then it's all about the exploitation and then the tug of war back and forth between whom he is and what he desires. And what we end up having here, especially with Robert Mitchum, one of his opening lines is like, you see that he's with Anne, he's fishing, and he just, you know, holds her close and he says, you see that cove over there? All I want to do is build a house over there, marry you, and live inside it and never leave. And like, that's him just kind of like being honest. And it's so much layered because it's like, he doesn't just want to be there with her. He wants to never leave because he doesn't want to ever risk going back to that old life that he left. And you realize that as the story progresses, it's like, yeah, he just wants to be, you know, quaint and simple. He doesn't want the drama of the city life of the gumshoe and all the stuff and pain that he's that led him to this town that he's now in.
That's right. A really good movie makes you kind of feel and identify that, you know, we've all had points in our life where we feel like our past or bad decisions we've made or people in our past come back to haunt us or could ruin our future happiness. And this caught that so well, as you said, by him very clearly stating, this is my dream. This would be my heaven. And then being film noir, of course, it unwraps, you know, and in layers like an onion until you can't. There's no way out of it, but you have to figure out, how does he end this? How does it resolve? Because he can't get away from it. I think I texted you. I said he knew that Kathy was bad, but the flame was too bright. You know, he's like a moth. He can't escape it. And we have to give kudos, certainly as writers, we have to give kudos to the screenplay. It was written by
From Daniel Manwaring,
Manwaring, which was based on his own novel, which is Build My Gallows High. And actually, I think on Twitter, Razorfist raised a thing when I posted about this. He's like, "See what you get when you actually let the author adapt his own work, you know, for the screen." It's like it was pure.
It was pure, but the other part too, what Daniel Manwaring had above a lot of other authors, at least on the novelistic side, is that he understood the finer details. I mean, one thing that I would, because again, I read Build My Gallows High in maybe in my first year of high school as part of my English class, so I haven't actually gone back to it, but I remember it was a quick read. At least for me it was, because it's just a really like engaging story. But I think because, like for me at least, it felt like a quick read, he probably understood the core concept of filmmaking, which is that on a novel it's all about like the finer details and what's going on and everything to build the atmosphere and mood. But with film, it's really about the bare essentials, because all those finer details are done visually. And I think because Daniel Manwaring understood that, or at least suspected that was the case, and knew that this was going to be a very low budget film, because again, RKO was the one that commissioned it, I think.
It was not an A picture.
He just knew, like, I got to get to the point. He's like, I got to just get to the point. And whereas, like, conversely, today you'll get something like one of the novels that was adapted, I think, by the same novel writer to a screenplay was The Martian. And that's a very dense, like, it's a beautiful film, but it's a very dense film in comparison. And because it dwells a little bit more on the finer details and not so much the bare essentials. And I think that's where you see, I think that goes more into the talent of Daniel Manwaring, as opposed to some of the others that just cross over because it's a paycheck, and they delegate the rewrites to other people like me or you to get it all nice and clean for the final parts of production.
And it's trusting the director. I just wanted to say thank you again to Troy. Thank you, $5. I cannot afford the sort of education I get from these deep dives from Tom Conkle, Script Doctor, explaining that. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me how much you've been supportive. I know he and I both appreciate every time you jump in and have a comment. So thank you, Troy. One thing you raised a great point. RKO was this kind of, they were in the business of B movies, and every once in a while they'd manage to get like what consider an A picture in the market, and they would always bring together their regulars, and one of them was Jacques Tournier. And Jacques Tournier, if I'm not mistaken, he is the son of a French film director who I think was named Maurice Tournier. and he kind of made a name for himself making films like I Walked with the Zombie, and he did the original Cat People, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and he had an incredible cinematographer whose last name I will butcher. I think his name was Nicholas Merceraka, and he also shot Cat People. And those people brought together, like Jane Greer, Robert Mitchum, that DP, Jacques Tournier, all of that working with a great script. You get this incredible alchemy of trusting the material, to everything, taken up to the next level. It is cynical and bitter and fatalistic, and it has that, archetypal film noir hero that they were just creating in that moment. And if you look at the film, at Mitchum's character, there's this incredible, the trench coat, the hat, everything, the attitude is all there, fully formed. And remember, this is the beginning of his career. This is the beginning of movies like this. And yet this emerges and feels like it's today. It feels like it's fully mature. It feels like it existed and it always existed. And to me, that's a great film where you feel just, that's it. It's like it is exactly hitting all the right notes. It moves right. The light and shadow, the way it's shot, all of it just seems genre defining. And that's why it's so worth looking at Out of the Past, because this modest little movie, in my opinion, is in the top pantheon, like top 5 of all the very best film noirs out of the 40s. And
well, not only that, it teaches
masterful.
a young man how to flirt.
Yes, exactly. And so many lines. You and I were joking before, where he's like, when he gets mad at her, he's like, "Hey, do you mind? I got to sleep in this room,"
Yeah.
Or he's gambling, and he's like, "Is there any way to win?" And he's like, "There's a way to lose more slowly."
Yeah, there's a way to lose less. Yeah.
Lose more slowly. I love lines like that, and their love of words and the respect for that is really the key to this. Is noir did not have a lot of didn't have a lot of money, it didn't have a lot of resources, but what it did have was a love of language and a visual style, and they took that as far as they could in Out of the Past. I feel like not only did they introduce that kind of inescapable destructive femme fatale with her who just gets men to go to their demise, but it elevated it with this humorous dialogue. Even the thugs were clever.
Yeah.
Every line moved that thing forward. And frankly, I think with newcomers, like Kirk Douglas and everything, they were hungry. And this film just came together, and the alchemy of it made the film better than even the sum of its parts. Because if you look at it now, it's like, my God, every little level of Out of the Past has everyone working at the top of their game. You have Kirk Douglas as the villain. You have him, Mitchum as the detective. You have Jane Greer as the femme fatale, and then on top of that all, you have the music working. You have the lighting working. The story is just airtight and intricate. As you are always saying, it's a simple character's complex plot, and it really is.
Complex character.
Oh, sorry,
plot.
complex character, simple plot. Yeah, the opposite of what you just said. Yeah. Well, who knows? I don't know what I'm talking about. But
you're right,
really,
and I think that is to go down to here's a question I like to pose. Do you suspect that because typewriters were very difficult to depress the keys in those days, that as a result the writers had to be more conscientious about what they actually put effort into writing? Because it took work. I had to practice on those things. I had to practice on those things, and your fingers would be sore just after typing "the quick brown fox ran over the lazy dog." Like your fingers would swell and ache because you have to put your whole body into these rusted old keys.
I know, it blows my mind when you have to do a revision. Like, you've got a revision in the middle of a page, and sometimes you'd have to retype, or you'd have to do it. It really, I think you're right. It created a discipline, and it probably was frustrating too, like unbelievably frustrating. You get in the middle of a page, and we take for granted now that we can change things instantly in a word processor. But in that, there was a certain commitment to doing it. And also, you had one copy that you needed to have copy, or you'd lose the script.
The Mimeo machines back then took forever.
Took forever to get a copy, and I think you're right. You had to choose your words carefully, and you had to really they probably did a lot of, you know, handwriting it out. But when you finally, you know, put the typewriter to paper, yes, it created discipline. And I do wonder if that's also the same. I love nonlinear editing and I love being able to do that, but there was a certain commitment to having to scratch the negative and glue shots together back then, and like, this is my cut and this is what I'm going to do. You had to make definitive choices, which is more amazing as you watch something now. You're like, oh, right, they didn't have you know, nonlinear editing, they didn't have word processing, they had to make sure it was right this way. You know, right or wrong, you made a decision when you were cutting the negative to make your cut, your final cut, and you couldn't make a variation on that. In the old days, you literally would have a roll and a B roll of the film, and you would cut, and the very edge of one of the actual frames of the camera original or a dupe of the camera original, you would glue. You know, you would glue from A to B and cut black between them so that they could print between the two shots, from one shot to the next. You had two reels next to each other. So that was a huge, you know, optical commitment to actually gluing the thing together and knowing where the cuts were and knowing what you were doing. Ditto the script. You know, if you wanted to make a big change in the middle of it, you had to type that whole thing again.
And it was the effort of planning, and it wasn't even so much like they planned it all by like writing it all down. It was basically roundtable rooms where they're just talking and trying to commit it to memory, to the point where it became like a reflexive thing to do for the actual production. It's like, okay, we got to do this shot, we got to do this candle, we got to do this measurements. We only have a corner. We don't have a full room. We only have a corner, so we got to make that back wall look a little interesting, but not more interesting than the actors. And then it's basically like very functionary cinematography. It's like, okay, what are the actors doing? How can we make what they're doing the best focal point for the shot, and then just follow it that way, as opposed to, you see conversely with other films where it's all about the setting and the grandiose experience, and oh, look at all the work that that everyone did building the set or constructing the location and whatnot, and you kind of forget that you're supposed to be watching people in your movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like movies are about faces and people at the end of the day. You want to create great atmosphere, you want to create, you know, a setting and a mood and a location, but at the end of the day, if you don't have people that you care about, and it's not about people, you lose people. And yes, Zach, if you haven't seen it, you definitely it's out there. If you do a search for Out of the Past, I think, I don't know,
I'm pretty sure there's a copy of it. I think there's an authorized copy of it on YouTube for you to watch.
Yeah, okay. I think there is a YouTube copy. There's maybe Hulu. I'm not sure. I have the Blu-ray of it. It's really cheap on Blu-ray. I think I picked it up for like $8 or $9, and it looks gorgeous. It's a retransfer.
I have a DVD, and it's a very cheap DVD because it doesn't even have a subtitle option. So like, if I wanted to, like, you know, commit some of the lines to memory, I can't do it. It's like one of those older. It's like got the cardboard casing with a little bit of the plastic lip on it. So
yeah. No, this is it's worth picking up then, because on Blu-ray this has a DTS sound on it. They've kind of remastered the sound and cleaned it up, and the picture is gorgeous on the it's on the Archive Collection Warner Brothers Blu-ray. I highly recommend, if you love words, you love that attitude in noir, and you just want to see good acting, amazing you know, storytelling, definitely pick up Out of the Past, because to me, it feels like, you know, it's one of those few films that feels like it could have been made now. You know, that was another thing that inspired me when I was doing my noir. I was like, okay, what do I have as far as resources? I've got people. We can have some clever lines. We can try and be funny. We can do this or that. Let's try and make that. And that's exactly what they did with Out of the Past. They made this scrappy film with these incredible people that were just hungry and relative newcomers. You know, the movie did modestly well. It didn't, you know, get any big awards or anything. But over time, everyone started to appreciate just how good Out of the Past was as a film, and now I would say it represents the genre completely. Like, to me, it's just definitive as far as the tropes now that we see, that what we consider film noir.
Yeah, I would say it's one of the what would be 4 or 5 films of that era that pretty much cements what the genre of film noir actually is.
Yeah.
And because right now I'm only just thinking of the 3 that we mentioned, like the Double Indemnity and Maltese Falcon and this right now, but I'm pretty sure there's Gaslight, I think, is another one. And The letter. The letter.
there's
I think the letter is one, right? The
yeah,
letter.
the letter is definitely one. One of the other ones that people always talk about, of course, are The Big Sleep. There's also one. I don't know if it's Murder My Sweet. I'm trying to remember what it was, but Dick Powell playing Philip Marlowe. That's actually a very good film, a very interesting movie around that period. Those films started to really define. But yeah, The Letter is another one, and I think this film sort of rests. I think it's 1947, which is kind of resting right in the middle of it,
Of
and
the
it was
pickup of it,
definitely yeah, and for me, I think the sort of indifferent ex-private eye, experienced guy who's kind of going through. He apparently Robert Mitchum went up against like Humphrey Bogart and Dick Powell and John Garfield. They all passed on this film to their regret, And then Kirk Douglas was starting off his career and saw it as a platform where he could build. And according to people on the set, they had this kind of struggle to dominate the set and overshadow each other, and they were competitive, which actually helps the film because they are always verbally sparring. Do you remember that scene where Mitchum's getting ready to get out of town? He's seen Kathy, he found her, and he's getting his shoes and stuff together, and there's a knock on the door, and he opens it, and it's Kirk Douglas instead of her, and he sees his face, and he's like, I hate surprises. You want to close the door and just forget the whole thing? And it's such a Kirk Douglas line. It's such a witty, clever thing. And you're so tense because you're like, okay, is he going to find out? Is she going to come up behind him and the whole movie's over? They do that all the time with just missing the other character, or he'll spill a drink and they look down just as she passes by. I love stuff like that. Are you more of a Mitchum guy or a Douglas guy as far as the character?
I'm more of a Mitchum guy just because he's a bit more jovial as an actual person. He played a trick on Jane Greer by pretending like he didn't know his lines, but he actually had them memorized.
That sounds like him.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, he played it so relaxed. He basically came at it with kind of like a Brandoism. Is like before Brando, he just like, you got to be a little intuitive. Right. You got to know the lines so well that they just come out, and you're just you're focusing more on the emotion as opposed to the actual memorizing of the lines. And you can see that in different, like, whenever I see a model learning to be an actor for the first time in a movie with a decent budget, you're like, they're focusing hard. Way too much on what they're saying and not so much what they're doing. And then you take a look at that same like a classic actor like Robert Mitchum back in the day, who wasn't classically trained, the same age as like that model or that singer transferring over, and he's just like, I just made sure I knew what I was supposed to say so I could focus on everything else. And like that's how you have that intuitive aspect to it.
I agree, and
it also afforded improv as well, because
very much
there's this one point
you know it that well.
Yeah, because you know it so well, but at the same time, there's a point where Mitchum is smoking in a scene where he's not supposed to, and Kirk Douglas's line is to offer him a cigarette, and Mitchum like just holds up his hands like already got one, And
is that when he goes? Oh, I remember. He goes cigarette, and he goes smoking.
Smoking, yeah.
He just goes smoking. And speaking of cigarettes, there's a drinking game there as to how many times they light cigarettes and smoke. That is the most smoke and cigarettes of any film I've ever seen in my life.
Did you catch the brand? Because I never catch the brand of cigarettes they're smoking.
I did not catch the brand. I would be very curious if it's probably like Lucky or something like that. But
Lucky or maybe a Marlboro or something, because I'm like, this is the sponsor of the movie.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you could create a drinking game, or you could at least do a count. I would love, because they amplified and used cigarette smoke in this peculiar way all the time. People were always lighting up, and it always helped the lighting because it would backlight the smoke. The DP would use it for atmosphere. But they smoke so much in that movie. It's crazy. I sometimes when I'm just really bored, I need to just count how many times they light up or smoke a cigarette. I bet it's 100.
I would not be surprised. I know within that flashback, it's at least a dozen times.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Troy says, does it predate Morley's brand cigarettes? That's a good
Let's
question.
see, 47. When did
Was that
Morley's start?
was that the nickname for Marlboro cigarettes? Is that what they called them, Morley's? I don't know. I don't know. It's
Maybe, I don't know.
possible.
I've never been
We
much of
can
a
look
smoker.
this up. Yeah, I am not much of a smoker. But well, let's see. What cigarette? This is
Well,
what the internet was made for.
so here we
What
go.
cigarette?
Morley is apparently a fictional brand of cigarettes that has appeared in various television
Ah,
shows and films. Okay, so this is again. I entered the film industry when smoking on film was taboo. so,
right, right.
so like I don't know. This stuff here. Um,
I had to sort of hide when I was doing Trouble Is My Business. At the opening, my character is smoking a cigarette, but in order to do it on the yes, it's the prop brand. You're right. I had to smoke a cloved cigarette because they would not allow a regular cigarette on the set. So it was so nasty. I turned blue the first puff I took of it. And of course it's a close up. And I was like, okay, dolly in on me just as I'm answering the phone. I'll take a puff of the cigarette, put it down. And I took the first puff of this thing and I was like, wow, cloves are strong. it just floored me. It was crazy. But it works so well in this film. Thank you, Troy. I think you're right. That may have been the prop that they used.
maybe the earliest I can see is 1968.
Yeah.
From Morley's.
Yeah.
So I think it does predate that.
I think also cigarettes carried a sexual charge. I really do.
Well, yeah. I mean, what's the first thing you do after sex, right? You grab a
That's
smoke.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they sort of flick the cigarette on the floor, or they'll have a cigarette afterwards. And I feel like it's a symbol. It's an instrument of power sometimes, of like who lights whose cigarette. There's all this kind of interplay and byplay between them. And all of it has that menace and power of a gesture, just forcing, lighting a cigarette and forcing someone to pay attention to you, and I think there's a tradition
drawing
in film
your
noir.
eyes to lips too, right? And
oh, absolutely. And the other part it also was. Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say the only other thing is it shows power. It shows the power struggle. Jane Greer lighting his cigarette versus him offering her one. You show that he's under her spell or not under her spell when he smokes in her presence. It's really interesting.
Well, one of the things that I always felt kind of funny with regards to like lighting up a cigarette after sex is, and I always think this, if you're doing it right, you should be like recovering like a heavy breathing afterwards. And the last thing you kind of want to do is just inhale like smoke into your lungs while you're trying to catch your breath. But yet that's right. That's what you kind of see. It's like
if you have smoke,
need that after moment where they're like catching their breath from like the passionate lovemaking. And then once it catches, exactly. Like, okay, do you want a cigarette?
Exactly. Like, yeah, I was saying, if you have smoke, you probably need more lube because there's some problem there if you're smoking. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a funny affectation, but it certainly was driven home and out of the past because, I encourage everyone in the chat or anyone listening to this later, if you want to see some really peculiar, extensive cigarette smoke, definitely Out of the Past has some great usage of it to tell the story and define the characters, and I love that. I think Kathy's character, if we can talk about her for a minute.
Go for it. Yeah,
I think she is probably the perfect sort of man-eating, unscrupulous femme fatale. And what I love about her character, though, is there is a purity. I think you mentioned this, that she comes in white to not even hide, the depth. Hello, BW. Thank you for coming in. To hide the depth of her evil, that she doesn't hesitate to cross or harm people. I mean, multiple times, right?
Yeah, it's almost reflexive.
Yeah, and it gets cast in a worse light every time you see her. And something that I think that is interesting is kind of post World War II, she had a viciousness to her. She was a catalyst in the story because she sort of shed light on a fear that after the war, women they had been changed somewhat from their role. That when the men went to war and women filled in some of these other jobs and things, that they weren't. They were given a more agency and Kathy's
responsibility and a role in
responsibility.
society. Yeah.
Yes, and natural male fear of the kind of the unknown and a woman's wilds and her being able to double cross and draw someone in. Her sexuality was very powerful, was something that made this film very significant, and she really bit into that hard. I think the actress understood the kind of distance that attracts. She would meet him a little bit, but not go all the way to him. She'd have to draw him in, and you could see why he fell for her, why he loved her. But at the same time, you're going, oh my God, she is just so bad for him. She is everything that that men might fear about a woman's wiles and getting you to do something that you know to be wrong, to compromise your moral code in order to win her heart. And I feel like Jeff Bailey, the Robert Mitchum character, knows that he's compromising, but then there was like a baby, I don't care kind of thing, and he kind of delightfully throws away his scruples because she's so alluring, and
he's learned his lesson by the time he's met Anne, and now it's basically she's just, when she comes back into his life, it's that tug of war where he's got a little bit more slack on his end, so he can actually play around with Kathy, so that keep her at bay, so he can find out what's her real motive. Because the entire impetus for the story is the fact that Kathy may or may not have actually shot Whit and stolen $40,000. And what does Whit really want? Does he want the girl or not, or the money back? But at the same time, he's like, I don't care about the money. I want the girl. Yet there's this completely other side story that Jeff is brought into, where if his accountant isn't taken care of, his finances are going to be released to the Treasury Department, and they're going to take all of his money. So you're like, it's got this. Like, they're very just isolated, simple plots, but they all are well woven together to make you understand what Whit actually wants, and is he going to use Kathy and Jeff as patsies so he can get away from whatever repercussions are being for whatever criminal activities he's doing to that allow him this money. So it's very, very interesting, and it's miraculously easy to follow, which is kind of a relief when you're dealing with this type of story, because it's about finding a girl, and it's why you find the girl. Well, she's got money, and she physically assaulted me, and then when he meets her, he's like, yeah, I would like to be physically assaulted by her too, and so he does, and so he goes that way, and then when everything gets turned up, he abandons that life only to be brought back, and now Whit's like, okay, I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, or 3 birds with 1 stone. I'm going to kill my accountant who's blackmailing me, and frame these 2 that pretty much took my money and ran off and wronged me. And it's so simple to follow, but because these characters are very interesting, they hold their own, they chew the scenery without making it feel like bad or revolting in any way. It's just complete entertainment. It's you're just so engaged, and you realize, and the movie's over before you even realize it started. It feels like in some cases you're like, wow, 90 minutes, that was quick.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot happens, and you're right that really that seminal, just that moment where you capture in film noir a hero's fall from grace. He's there. He's found her in Acapulco. I think it's Acapulco, and he's fallen for her, and
Mexico,
they kiss. Acapulco. Yeah, and they kiss, and she's like, pleads with him. And so, I didn't know what I was doing. I just hated him, but I didn't take anything. And she's like, don't you believe me? And he goes, baby, I don't care, and kisses her. And I'm like, wow, the woman is just no good, but he can't help himself. And again, that influenced, I keep going back to my own film, but in Trouble's My Business, I have a scene where we're in the house, the Montemar house, and Jennifer comes up to my character, Roland Drake, and she going, do you believe me? Do you miss me? And he's like, yeah. And he gives her a kiss, and she's like, okay, I'll see you in a little bit, and walks off. And just on Roland Drake's face, you can just see, like, I don't believe a word that's coming out of her mouth, but she's cute, and I'll believe it.
Like,
and
how long can I milk this for?
Yeah, exactly. She's like, don't you trust? She goes, don't you trust me? Don't you trust me? Let's see. We had somebody real quick. Zach is asking a question about, I guess, my film. Let me see. Not to interrupt, but I'm curious how you managed to have Catherine and Jennifer look so different besides the hair and makeup. That is a really good point. There were a couple of things that we employed in this. The character of Catherine, which is the dark-haired version of her, I actually filmed many months earlier, and I used different lighting, different makeup on her. We even timed, it was shot in color and then made into black and white. We used slightly different color timing on her, but she was a different weight. And then I had Brittany wait to play Jennifer, and Jennifer is actually her a little bit heavier, different makeup and different color timing on her. So actually her body shape changed a little bit. And we had the luxury of being an indie film of I grouped everything I could with Catherine in one shoot, and then the shoot with her as Jennifer, she literally did the reverse of what some people, like, they put on weight for a role or then they lose a bunch of weight for a role. Well, for the same role, she got extra thin and then put on a little extra, and we shot the two with some distance between them. So literally she kind of looks like her own sister, and that was a luxury we had by planning the shoot. I shot the beginning section with Catherine first, then there was a period where we were down and getting other stuff together, and then I knew Jennifer would come in later, and to her credit, she really changed herself physically. She even stood differently, she carried her weight differently, and it does make it look different. If you side by side the two frames, she looks like a different woman from the dinner scene with Jennifer. If you compare that to Catherine, who walks in the office, she really does look different, because even her face changed a little bit with the weight change.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one little tell, and I'm not going to reveal what that tell is because you got to go watch the movie.
You gotta go watch the movie. Thank you
Yeah.
for not revealing that, but yes.
No, I'm not.
It
No,
was
and I
fun.
want them to look really close at it because it's not something a lot of audiences would pick up on. But when you're like in the role of the protagonist and you're looking at a beautiful woman in front of you, you kind of absorb every single detail you can. And
Yes.
at some points, I mean, this is one thing I've learned just from socializing as I grew up, is that sometimes you can meet someone that looks beautiful at first sight, but over time, as you get used to them by habit, you might either see their flaws and not really find them too attractive. And then the reverse is also true, where someone doesn't feel like very attractive, but as you see them more often, you see all these little interesting aspects about them physically that just kind of get your motor going. And the thing that solidifies that is obviously the personality. Like, do you want to be around them or whatnot?
That's right.
And that's something that's really fascinating to sort of pick up on in your own personal life when you're just interacting with people. And it's also, if you're like an aspiring writer or an actor or director or editor, it's like you gotta be a people watcher and observe those types of things and recognize those things of yourself, because they might come in handy when you're creating a new story.
That is true. One funny thing, Zach, I will say the best compliment came accidentally, because when I was submitting it for film festivals, it wasn't finished, so I didn't have the credit roll at the end. So I had submitted a screener, and we got a call from one of the festivals, and they're like, "Hey, we really liked it. We want to nominate a couple of your actresses for an acting award, but we don't have the credits. Who was the actress who played Jennifer?" And I was like, "That's Brittany Powell." And they're like, "Great. And Catherine?" And I was like, "That's also her." And she's like, "Oh, well, I guess we won't have to do two nominations." I was like, "You thought they were two different people?" They're like, "We thought they were sisters. We thought," because one is slimmer and seems more angular and has a little darker eye. And I was like, "No, that's the same thing." So that was the best sort of unintended compliment, because they're like, "Okay, well then we won't do two nominations."
That'd be funny if they did do two nominations, but the other part I think that
hilarious.
helps is the bob haircut, or like her wig.
Yes,
it
changes
creates
the shape of her face.
It changes the shape of her face, makes it more like kind of a heart-shaped, narrower part. And then when she has the long flowing hair, it kind of balances everything out and
Round.
kind of
Yeah.
draws everything to like the eyes, then the shoulders, and then but in like a different order, because with the bob you're looking kind of like at the chest, shoulders, and then up, down to up.
Yes.
With the longer hair, you're going from eyes down to the chest. So yeah, your entire perception of the character is dictated by the hairstyle, and then how they wear it. And yeah, like that helps, I guess, with the distraction of the role. And yeah, Brittany Powell was amazing in this.
Yeah, she did a great
like
job.
Even when I was showing the movie to some of my friends, they're all like, "We really like that actress," and I'm like, "Yeah, I bet you do."
Yeah, it's like genetically designed to do that, and it really underlines how important it is when you're making a movie or you're in the audience watching a movie. It's like how important the little details, like what they're wearing, what makeup they have, the costume, lighting, everything conveys character, and you subconsciously pick up on cues, and you're looking for cues and things. And if you play with that and you make real choices to like make, this person seems darker, and you're right, the hair changes the face and all this kind of stuff, you can really have a lot of fun with it. But it just underlines how important the hair, the makeup, costuming, everything. There isn't an unimportant department on a film. They all, if they're firing on all thrusters, every section, every part of the film is moving that story forward and making it more alive and making the visual script just flow. And certainly, like we were saying with Kathy, her showing up in that white hat and white, and which is traditionally you purity, it's signaling that she's innocent and good. They did that on purpose, and they did it beautifully to sort of complicate things. And something that Greer did so well is she's seductive. You would have like a tropical rain shower that makes them go inside to the bungalow, and it's lit by that one little light, and the glowing beach where she would meet it. All those locations, the time of day, the ocean, all of that makes it seem very dreamlike, but also gives it such a sense of place. It's so important to create that, whether it's the urban landscape or you're using nature. Yeah, she that's right, Zach. She was very angular, and her arms are defined. Yes, exactly. She changed her body, and that was so important to it, because we wanted to very subtly have it where some people are like, yeah, okay, I get it. It's two sisters, it's twins. I get that. But to just have you just go, now, wait a minute, are you sure? Is that the same? You just want just a hint of doubt in there. And I think it works. And
I
she
think
did a beautiful job. It
is the fact that you don't put the two characters side by side in a single shot, which is, I think,
exactly,
that makes it benefit more, because now it's putting the onus on the audience to rely on their memory and figure it out that way, as opposed to, kind of like if you put Clark Kent and Superman next to each other, you're probably going to be able to determine that they're actually the same person.
Yeah, you're like, wait a minute, without the glasses, you look pretty.
They're almost
familiar.
The same height, and one's wearing a hat. And
yeah, the hat makes all the difference. Yeah, no, you're right. I intentionally also shot them differently. There was a conscious choice to change the focal length of the lens. You'll notice that when she's opening the safe, I'm really tight on her nose and her mouth, and it's like a 50 millimeter, which kind of changes the face too. It changes the way that you feel about the character and how you're looking at the character, and all those just kind of are subtle ammunition to make it just seem a little bit different. And I thought it would be fun to try, because it's such a noir trope to have. They certainly, Hitchcock has used it as well, and I wanted to play with it. It was my little Vertigo nod in there, and certainly there's an Out of the Past nod when Jane Greer's character Kathy is watching Robert Mitchum fight somebody. You see the shadow of their punching and everything on her face, and she almost seems to have this kind of sexual thrill watching it. Well, that's duplicated when a man jumps into the office in Trouble Is My Business. You see the fight in shadow playing across her face, and you can't quite make out how she feels about it. You're like, why isn't she upset? Like, why isn't she panicking while they're having this giant fist fight? And it's like, oh, later on you realize it's like that's exactly what she wanted to have happen. So of course she was completely in control. She was almost getting a power thrill from something that should be disturbing, which is seeing two people fight. And I don't even show the fight, I kind of show it off camera with the shadows on her. And that idea was Tournier and out of the past. He was using that, you know, gorgeous black and white cinematography to tell the story with light and shadow, and it definitely influenced me. I feel like the cinematography alone we could talk about for half an hour because it feels contemporary. You know,
Yeah,
it
because
feels
even
like
when you're like describing that type of scene, I'm thinking, okay, what would be a fun little exchange to do after that fight? And you have like, you know, the protagonist goes up to the woman and says, "You must be a fan of boxing," and she's like, "Well, they'd never let me be a contender." And then he would say something like, "Well, I could train you for a few rounds," and you know, you just have that kind of back and forth banter that totally fits within like the noir style, and you just don't get
yes,
something like that these days that isn't like pretty much directly like ham-fisted, like we're doing a joke here. Like you just have to have
exactly.
that
It's
kind
that
of,
byplay. It's
yeah,
foreplay. Yeah, it's verbal
it's a verbal
foreplay.
foreplay and double entendre. And I'm reminded like of like what Catherine says when she's talking about Witch. She's like, "I'm sorry he didn't die," and Jeff's like, "Give him time." That's
Yeah,
like
yeah, it's
it's
such a great line.
it's just some quick like off the cuff type of thing.
Yeah.
And the other part too is like, again, like for any writers out there that when you wonder why lines are really good, it's usually there's a lot of thought behind them, and it's
Yes.
not just it's they usually would do the first draft was like, we just got to get it out, like what are you trying to say here, and then afterwards it's where you kind of go and you're reflecting and thinking like, how can I make this phrase sing, what sort of banter do I have that fits within the character's style, because as you mentioned earlier and what you used as influence for Trouble Is My Business, when we first see
Yeah.
Kathy, she's in all white. Yet when we first see Anne, she's in a like darker multiple colors of clothes. Like she's got a
That's
sweater, she's got a
right.
dark skirt.
She's very plain. Yeah,
She's very
she's very
plain,
plain
but
and
the thing is,
yeah.
she's letting her natural beauty and her soul kind of glow out of that. Whereas
Yes.
with Kathy, when we first see her, it's all about the dress to amplify something that's
Yes.
not really there, which is the soul. And that's what I
Yeah.
really liked about film noir, especially when they did that in Double Indemnity. The first time we see the wife, she's
Yes. You're
wearing
right.
nothing but a white towel, and it really accentuates the things that don't actually matter. It's like it's not herself that's powerfully broadcasting. It's what she doesn't have that's getting us the attention, and that's something that
That's
I always
true.
think is kind of fascinating with femme fatale characters.
And that you bring up an interesting point of that patter, the talking, the verbal foreplay that we talked about. Double Indemnity, Fred McMurray had kind of a nervous patter in Double Indemnity with her as coming down, whereas the detached quality of Mitchum, he kind of felt serene and cool and laid back. But both of them use that kind of verbal banter and the prevalence of, you know, voiceover to really show where their characters were and how they felt. And I feel like even the script knew about it, because there were lines where he's like, "Hey, I you know, Douglas says something like, you just sit and stay inside yourself, and you wait for me
Yeah,
to talk." I like that, you know, and I love that about the film, because it gives him full power. You know, it gives Mitchum his kind of subtle, but he seems like an everyman and common, and yet he speaks above his station. He's always making a clever line, or the people around him are saying something that has meaning beyond just the obvious meaning, you know.
and
And
yeah, and even to follow up
yeah,
with that line, like Wit says, "You just sit and stay inside yourself. You wait for me to talk." I like that. And Jeff's response is, and it's very apropos of a detective and also a good model for life, is, "I never found out much by listening to myself." And that's how you
yes,
can
that's
really
such a
pick
great
up
line.
on that's how you can pick up on a whole bunch of characters. Who talks the most and why do they talk the most in common conversation? And that's kind of
Yeah,
one of the fascinating things, especially when writing. It's like, okay, I've got this one character. Why is he so talkative? He has so much to hide. Why is this guy so
yeah,
silent and kind of cool? He has nothing to hide. He's cool. He's
he has
fine
nothing
with
to hide.
the way things are, and that's something to always think about when you're coming up with stories, or even just watching an interesting film. You can
I
even go
agree.
back to like say Chasing Amy, Kevin Smith film. Um,
Yeah,
uh, the Jason Lee character talks ad nauseum. He has so much to hide. He's closeted
right.
homosexual. Ben Affleck's character only says what he needs to say. Very short. He only have monologues to the girlfriend, but anytime else he's with the other guys, it's basically short to the point. He doesn't
Hmm.
care. But Jason Lee just goes on and on. and on.
And on. Yeah. With guilt, he's like unraveling. BW had something I wanted to address, if you don't mind, script.
Go right ahead,
He says,
please.
Mr. Conkle, I apologize if somebody's already asked. How much did your film cost? Ooh. Although I do animation for my own projects, I'm still impressed what one can do with little to no money. Well, in hard costs, I paid my people, I paid my crew. Being a period film, there were certain things you had to buy, like costumes, things that just you couldn't get for free. My total out of pocket on just getting it in the can was around 90,000, and then I would say in sweat equity with Mike Smith, who is my producer, doing visual effects with me. We did it easily. I would say about $500,000 worth for free of visual effects work, color timing, doing the music, doing the mix. Trip Brock at Monkeyland Audio did a 5.1 mix. So we got a lot of pluses on top of that because people believed in the film. But as far as hard cost, just under $100K to do a period piece, which I'm very proud that we were able to do it for that, and that it's made its money back, and that's the important thing.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't want to
really
do.
impressive.
Yeah, I didn't want to do, to be honest, I didn't want to do the, two guys on a couch talking and a zombie walks in or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's plenty of indie films like that. And I thought I want to do a film noir in the 40s, done in the style of those films, with the resources that I have. And you just kind of have to look around and see what is available. And in this case, I said, okay, if John Huston or Jacques Tournier had a red camera and
Yep.
had really talented friends who could act, and had Vernon Wells and had some hats, what would we do? And it ended up being that. And certainly, Out of the Past was in my mind the entire time, because it is such a genre-defining film that when I visited with you, I realized just how deeply it got under my skin, because the DNA of that movie is certainly in my movie and in so many movies.
Mhm.
So many films were, influenced by just the cleverness of the banter and the way that it's shot. Just that languid, nonchalant way that he delivers those lines, that kind of acting was way ahead of its time. Wouldn't you agree?
Pretty much, yeah. Because again, it was so. Here's the thing with the B movies: when you have a B movie or a low budget film, you have to compensate for what you don't have, and the only way you can compensate for that is with your characters and your actors. And I think that's why it stands such the test of time. They're just so focused on just trying to make you not pull your eyes away from the screen with what little they
Yes.
have. And I think that's
Yes.
a real benefit to it. And I think that's why they got very, like, here's the other part too. So we're talking about the early 20th century, 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
where in the last 80 years, actors went from being considered vagabonds and, gutter people to someone
Yes.
with class and moving performance. And we're right at the peak of where that's kind of being taken very seriously. And so that generation that's coming in is not looking at this as like a grift or anything of a nature. They actually feel like there's something important to it and valuable to it. And even what I always find kind of fascinating is that even Robert Mitchum, as fresh as he was, there was an incident on set where the costume department only did the front half of Jane Greer's dress because they wanted to save money and they didn't have time to do it. And he was like, "This is the leading lady of our film. You go back and you finish the dress so that she's not half naked from the backside." And they ended up doing that, and they did it in enough time so that they didn't end up losing their day. But
Oh, that's
that was the
funny.
type of mentality. It's like, just because they're actors doesn't mean that they weren't human at that point. And yet we get to a
That's right.
generation now where instead of it being about the product itself that they're doing and what they're trying to convey emotionally to an audience, now
Mm-hmm.
some talent is going far above that and elevating themselves higher than that position as like a point of
That's right.
influencers or prominence. When guys like Robert Mitchum, when he's seen his interviews, he's like, "I'm just doing a job, trying to have fun, make it authentic, and
Yep.
I
I
can't
love
act
that
better.
ethic.
That's like trying to act like I'm taller than I am, and you can't do it." So
Yeah. You don't
and
want to feel him
that's kind of,
acting. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's kind of something that's being missed a little bit. with generations that should definitely be coming back. I'm certain probably in the next 10, 15 years, people are kind of going to recycle and realize, oh yeah, there is this attitude that comes with the responsibility of just being an entertainer, because every job could be your last. So why would you want to go out in public and do something to prevent you from getting hired again, or make it
Yeah,
contentious with an
exactly.
audience, or contentious with a studio? It's best to like be quiet, focus on your craft, and then keep your personal life and that private. And you know, when
Amen.
you do
Yeah,
interact with
just
fans, be gracious.
exactly. Be grateful and just stand and deliver. That's the thing. We don't need to know. It
The
doesn't
Kurt
make
Russell
you
model:
special
hit your
just
mark,
because
say your line, shut up.
Yeah, I love that. And Russell Crowe said the same thing. He goes, "Why do you want to know my opinion? I'm an actor."
Same thing with Anthony Daniels, yeah. Or sorry, Anthony
Yeah, I
Hopkins.
love
Anthony
that.
Daniels
Yeah,
always
Anthony Hopkins.
volunteers his
Yeah.
opinion.
Oh, he always. Yeah, I was going to say he always does. Troy asked a great question, if I may. Yes, I'm just about to announce our new slate that we're doing at Lumenactus. I have written a script with Script Doctor called The Red Circle, which is one film we're going to make next year. Another one is I have a notion for another film noir. It's called Love Lies Bleeding. And
Ooh.
it would pick up, yeah, it would pick up kind of where Trouble left off, because it would be a new femme fatale who comes in, who's sort of like a cleaner for the Russians. And she's there to, spoiler alert, she's there to find a black book and possibly a diamond. And I'm going to reach out to Tricia Helfer to play that character. I think she would
Oh,
be
she'd be
perfect for
great.
that. Yeah, she's just perfect for the femme fatale. Mike and I have already got like a poster and a pitch together, and we are going to reach out to Tricia and see if what her price would be, and we'd bring back people like Gavron and everything we've learned from doing this film noir, and do a little bit more ambitious noir adventure where it's flipped. The detective is being pursued by the femme fatale. And I think that would be really interesting. And if we could get Tricia, I'd be delighted. So she's my first choice. So we're going to try and reach out to her. Another film I'm working on right now is called Island in the Stars. That's something I'm producing with Vernon Wells. It would be an Australian film, but it's very much like a Treasure Island or a Jules Verne adventure. It's set in a sort of futuristic colonial shipping culture, and this girl goes on an adventure with some mentors, and I'm hoping to reach out to people like Sam Neill or Brian Brown as a friend of Vernon's, Hugo Weaving, some great Australian actors that if we can get, it would be an amazing project that we're producing with a woman in Australia named Lucinda Bruce. And that would be Vernon, me, Mike, and Lucinda producing that. And it's called Island in the Stars. And then we have two other, a sci-fi project called Savage that I've been talking
Which is an
to
awesome
Ben.
story. I can confirm
Yes,
that.
I think it's a really good story. It's very John Carpenter. So there will be an announcement, hopefully in the next couple of months, as to what our slate's going to be at Lumenactus, and you can look for more of our slate on lumenactus.com. But thank you for asking. I'm really wanting to hit the ground running next year and get some of these films out. I've got, 7 or 8 years worth of films already ready to go. And yes, I agree. BW, there's something beautiful about period pieces. They, to me, are dreamlike, and they allow you to be very classic with your storytelling. And I do want to explore that more. I would say half of my slate is either sci-fi fantasy or period or set in its own sort of universe, because this one's a bit boring. So it's more interesting to create a world yourself and play in that world. Yeah, she's Canadian, so of course she is. Yes, Trish Helfer's
We make
gorgeous.
them pretty up here, yeah.
Yeah, good gene pool. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening to us talk about a film that we both love. It certainly shaped my love of noir. I hope if you haven't seen it, try and pick up a Blu-ray, or I do think you're right, Script. I think there's a copy on YouTube that you can watch. It is basically a film about a man. I would say he knowingly goes down the road where his destruction is waiting for him. It's silent, and you're anticipating it, and he's helpless and he's obsessed. And Robert Mitchum's character, you not only understand his thought process that brings it, but you sympathize with him, and you enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
That you know where it's leading, but Out of the Past is kind of the perfect title because his past is going to collide with him, and it's going to disrupt his present and seal his future. So I really hope you will check out Out of the Past, and I really enjoy talking about these movies. In the chat, leave some titles that you might want Script and I to look at, and possibly we could do a deep dive on something that you're interested in hearing our thoughts on, or it may be a film that we both love and we're like, I want to talk about that. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
we would love any input in the comments or the chat. We're trying to do this on a more regular basis because, it's garbage in, garbage out. If we feed ourselves good stories like this, I think it improves our writing together now that we're kind of writing as a team. And certainly as writers individually, the more we input good stuff, we can resynthesize that and come up with really good original stuff. And so this is kind of forcing us to take a look at why things are good. And hopefully you as an audience are like, hey, I should check that out. I didn't realize that was out there. Or I love that movie and now you've made me want to see it again. And that's the best compliment we can look for.
Exactly. It's more, instead of it being like a diet of quality entertainment, let's look at differently of changing your eating habit completely to find really satisfying meals so that you can feel healthy and then also know how to pick up something good based on advertisement and pattern, as opposed to some of the stuff that we're getting churned out here almost in a fast food style method. Because there's nothing really wrong with that. Like, listen, broccoli and carrots have been around forever. Like, hamburgers, yes. Not so much, but every once in a while you want a great hamburger, but you kind of have to go back to those traditional vegetables if you want to, not have diabetes or kidney failure.
You know what? You're absolutely right. Troy asked an interesting question real quick, if you want to jump in on that. In the holiday season, classic holiday films to look at. I always recommend, we recently did a radio parody of Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, that I wrote sort of as a deconstruction of it. But there is a few definitive portrayals, one of which I think is Scrooge from 1951, I think.
Alistair Sim one. Yep.
It's a beautiful Christmas story. Also from the same year, I think, is Out of the Past, Miracle on 34th Street.
Yes, that was message. 47, I think. Yep.
Yeah,
Miracle on 34th Street's a great one.
Do you have any that are your kind of go-to favorites? I mean, I have some modern ones I love. I have mostly modern ones.
Yeah, I like
Elf.
For the mostly modern ones that I have, I absolutely love Scrooged with Richard Donner, Bill Murray, Karen Allen. I love A Christmas Story. That's one of my dad's favorites Christmas movies. So every time I put that on, I have fond memories of him because he grew up in that period of Ralphie's age, and he would always tell stories of that nature. And the story and the cast is fantastic. Trying to think something. Elf is a great one as well. And trying to think of something else. Just looking behind me on my movie shelf, and it's like, Die Hard. Yeah, Die Hard.
Die Hard is Lethal Weapon, the first Lethal Weapon. Yeah.
First Lethal Weapon.
Troy makes a good point. People have talked about it a lot, but It's a Wonderful Life is a really terrific film. In a way, it is a kind of noir film in many ways, which I think is why it didn't do as well in its time. It had to find itself because it was a little darker and actually more contemporary in using its flashback, flash forward, and a very dark tone to it. But it would be interesting to pick one of these and do a deep dive. Maybe we do a deep dive into Miracle on 34th Street. I wouldn't mind that, or even A Christmas Carol might be a lot of fun to do. So these are great. Black Christmas, the holiday horror film.
I keep forgetting that It's a Wonderful Life is considered a Christmas film because it does take place around the Christmas time, but it's really more about everything that's not Christmas related. It just happens to take place in winter. Yeah.
It's about regret.
Yeah, I think people associate with Christmas because it was aired frequently on syndication or on affiliate networks during the Christmas time, and I think that's how it got that stigma on it. And that's a good stigma to have, actually. But yeah, that's I want to look into that again. So yeah, we should probably do that for the Christmas holidays.
I think that would be great. That's a great idea, Troy. And yes, Netter, you're right. We got to get Troy in here sometime. He's so supportive and wonderful. And there we go. A deep dive into Die Hard I would do any day. I love that movie. That movie is near perfect. It's in my pantheon with Back to the Future.
That monologue in the bathroom when he's pulling the glass out of his feet and talking about his wife.
Yes.
And
so good.
That is. I
Alan Rickman's first movie.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that Bruce was incredible. I miss John McTiernan. He that was part of his what was it, a triple he hit? He did that. He did Die Hard, Predator, and Hunt for Red October. I mean, just back to back to back. And he was an incredible filmmaker. I really miss him. He's one that, got derailed, but if I could be like a John McTiernan, I would be a happy man, because he hit it out of the park with those. So we'll look at some of these as ones we do a deep dive on. I could definitely get excited about that. And yes, I need to figure out to activate memberships. Troy, I will definitely do that, because I would love to do some commentaries specifically for members, do some director's commentary on some of the things that I've done. Would be a lot of fun, and maybe even talk about some more things in depth. So I will figure that part out very soon. But Script, I love talking about movies with you. Thank you so much for your insight on it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, because I love talking with movies about you, especially like great films, and I love the interaction we're getting from the chat. It's been growing with like, this is our second show. We got like double the people this time around than the previous.
Yeah, awesome. I'm grateful for that. I am.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. We will keep doing this and share our love of movies, and hopefully you will grow to love some of the movies that we point out, and certainly we can all commiserate on ones that we already love. So thank you for joining us, and also seek out of the Past. If you haven't seen it, if you have, take another look at it. If you watch Trouble Is My Business, you will see the last little Easter egg I will give you. When I walk out from Gavron's lair, and by the way, Gavron the villain's the only character who tells the truth in the entire film. If you see on the movie marquee between me and Jennifer, when we're talking on the street and the cable cars are going by, the movie that's playing on the marquee is Hang My Gallows High.
That was the European title for this, yeah.
That's right. So if you check it out, you'll see in the background on the movie marquee, you will see literally the book that Out of the Past was based on is the movie playing behind my character. And that was my biggest nod and thank you. A deep dive into Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is one of my favorite Westerns. I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan, so that would also be interesting. And I know a lot about that movie. I would love to talk about that movie.
Yeah, I've only seen it a couple of times, because it's like 3 hours, I think.
Yep, I got it on Blu-ray and watched it again recently, and it is.
I have the Fistful of Dollars Blu-ray box set. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Yes.
Go get that too.
Yeah. Talk about another perspective. You've got an Italian doing a take on Westerns that is definitive. It's just amazing. So yeah, we'll definitely take a look at Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because I love that movie. I love Leone. I love the whole cast, and I love the music. So much we can talk about. Thank you, everybody. We got a second on that. So Good, the Bad, and the Ugly moves up. So maybe we'll look at that, and we'll look at a Christmas film. And I promise I'll activate the membership. So Script and I are going to be writing our next movie together. We will keep you informed how that's going. We will be back and do another deep dive in the next week or so. Thank you all.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And this time I'm actually going to end the broadcast. So here we go. Here we go. Wait, one more thing. I have always been interested in filmmaking. Conkle and Script Doctor are two guys I enjoy listening to as somebody who like to make short films on my own. That's terrific. And I encourage you, short films are the best way to hone your craft. And when you get those done, let us know. I would love to see them. Take care, Troy. Thank you so much. Slithering, Zax, everybody. Thank you for participating with us, and we will see you soon.